She won $78 million. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't buy a mansion. She cooked a roast beef dinner and invited her entire family. Not one of them came. So she gave $60 million to strangers, packed one suitcase, and disappeared onto a ship with no return ticket. This is the story of what happens when a woman finally stops waiting to be loved and chooses herself instead. Eleanor Margaret Hale had not moved the mahogany dining table in 43 years. It had witnessed every Christmas morning, every birthday cake, every tear-stained homework crisis, and eventually the slow, aching departure of the people she loved most. First it was Michael, to Seattle, for software, then Sarah, to Denver, for a man who would become her ex-husband. The grandchildren stopped climbing onto her lap around the same time they discovered Instagram. Monthly weekends became strained holiday obligations. Strained obligations became sporadic phone calls that always seemed to drop when she mentioned visiting. She was 68 years old, widowed for 6 years, living in a 4-bedroom colonial in suburban Connecticut that echoed with the ghosts of piano recitals and teenage arguments. She talked to the television. She kept her phone charged and volume high, waiting for rings that rarely came. The loneliness had become a physical weight, a heaviness in her chest that no amount of gardening or book club meetings could lift. Then, on a Tuesday in late October, the impossible happened. She checked her ticket while drinking her morning tea. When she realized what she was seeing, the cup shattered on the tile floor, brown liquid seeping into the grout like spilled secrets. $78 million. For 3 days, she sat in the silence of her good fortune and told no one. She wanted to do this right. This money, she decided, would be a bridge, not a bribe, a foundation. She would pay off Michael's student loans from his failed MBA. She would buy Sarah the art studio she had always dreamed of, but could never afford as a single mother. She would establish trusts for the grandchildren, college funds, travel, whatever futures they imagined. Most importantly, she would gather them all. She would cook the roast beef they loved, the Yorkshire puddings that had been her mother's recipe, the apple pie with the lattice crust. She would tell them face to face, watching their eyes widen, feeling their arms around her neck for the first time in years. She would be necessary again. She would be present. She spent $400 at the butcher. She polished the silver. She washed the good linen, the ivory tablecloth with the slight stain from Sophie's 5th birthday party, the one shaped like a grape juice butterfly. She set 7 places with the 8th left empty for her late husband, Richard, because some traditions persist beyond reason. She sent the invitations via text and email, formal yet warm. Sunday dinner, 4 p.m. I have wonderful news. Please come. Love, Mom/Grandma. The responses trickled in with the efficiency of dismissals. Michael wrote first. Hey Mom, sounds great, but can't swing it. Quarterly reviews are brutal right now. Maybe Thanksgiving? Sarah called, her voice carrying the strained cheerfulness of someone negotiating with a creditor. Oh, Mom, Sunday's impossible. The kids have soccer playoffs, and honestly, the drive with Oliver's car sickness. Nightmare. Next time, for sure. Emma had a sorority event. Jack was chilling with friends. Sophie had a migraine. Oliver simply didn't respond. Eleanor stood in her kitchen at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning, the roast already seasoned, the house smelling of rosemary and thyme. She waited until 4, then 5, then 6. She hoped they would show. She didn't turn on the television. She wanted to hear the doorbell. She flinched at every car that passed. By 7, the roast was dry. By 8, the Yorkshires were hard as stones. By 9, she sat alone at the head of the table, the 7 other chairs gaping like open mouths, and she ate a slice of cold apple pie with her fingers, not bothering with a plate, The loneliness she discovered had mutated. It was no longer a gentle ache. It was a sharp, clean blade. She had offered them everything, her home, her heart, her abundance, and they had chosen other rooms, other tables, other lives. 2 weeks later, Eleanor walked into the offices of Hartford Children's Hospital with a cashier's check for $60 million. She established the Richard and Eleanor Hale Foundation for Pediatric Care, endowing a new wing, funding scholarships for nurses. She donated another $10 million to the local animal shelter, the library, and the community center where she had volunteered for years. She kept $8 million, enough to be comfortable, enough to be safe, but not enough to be a magnet. Then she called a travel agent and booked a world cruise. 6 months, single occupancy, no return ticket. The Serenity of the Seas departed from Miami on a Tuesday morning in November. Eleanor stood at the railing as the coastline receded, the wind lifting her silver hair from its careful bun. For the first time in a decade, she did not check her phone. She had left it on the kitchen counter, plugged in, volume high, next to a note that read simply, "I have gone to find out what I am like when no one needs anything from me. Be well. E." She was, it turned out, quite good company. By the time the ship reached Lisbon, she had learned the names of every crew member on her deck and could hold a passable conversation in Portuguese. In Barcelona, she took a cooking class and discovered that she had been over-salting her Yorkshire puddings for 30 years. In Cairo, she climbed to a rooftop at dusk and watched the light turn the city to copper, and felt for the first time in longer than she could account for that the world was extraordinarily large, and that this was a magnificent thing rather than a frightening one. She danced with the ship's doctor at the New Year's gala, badly, joyfully, without apology. She sent care packages to orphanages at every port. She read novels until 2 in the morning and slept until 9. She wrote in a journal she had bought in a market stall in Marrakesh, filling its pages not with grief, but with the small accumulating evidence of a life that was not finished. She did not write home. She was not hiding. She was, at last, arriving somewhere. They found out on a Sunday, exactly 1 month after the dinner that never was. Michael was scrolling through the Hartford Courant online while eating takeout Thai food in his Seattle condo, between meetings, having overstated the demands of his schedule to his mother, as he now could not stop remembering. The headline stopped his chopsticks mid-air. Local widow donates lottery millions to Children's Hospital. Embarks on solo world cruise. There was a photograph. Eleanor looked different. She wore a turquoise silk scarf instead of her usual cardigan. She was laughing at something off camera, her head thrown back, the lines around her eyes suggesting sun rather than sorrow. She looked, Michael realized, with a gut punch of recognition, like the mother he remembered from his childhood, the one who built forts and played flashlight tag, before he'd become too busy to remember she was still alive. Sarah saw it on Facebook, shared by a high school acquaintance. She read the article 3 times, her coffee growing cold. She stared at the photograph of her mother's hands, capable hands, cooking hands, hands that had braided her hair, and remembered the Sunday she had chosen soccer over the woman who had driven her to every practice for 10 years. The guilt arrived simultaneously, a tidal wave hitting 2 different coasts. They called each other first, Michael and Sarah, an alliance of panic. She won the lottery. She tried to give it to us. We didn't come. She gave it away. She's gone. They called her phone. It rang and rang in the empty house, the sound vibrating against the unused china in the cabinet. They called the travel company. Privacy laws protected her itinerary. They hired a private investigator who could only confirm she was somewhere between Singapore and Sydney, and that she had requested no forwarding address for mail. Emma, the oldest grandchild, drove to Connecticut to check on the house. She told herself it was practical, that someone needed to water the plants. She found the note on the kitchen counter, beside the silent phone. She read those plain, careful words. "I have gone to find out what I am like when no one needs anything from me." She felt their weight settle over her like a verdict. She sat down on the floor where the teacup had shattered weeks before, and she wept for 45 minutes. They tried to find her. Oh, how they tried. Michael sent emails to the cruise line daily, begging for a cabin number, a forwarding address, anything. Sarah posted in Facebook groups for world cruisers, attaching photos of Eleanor, pleading for sightings. The grandchildren wrote letters, actual handwritten letters, the first in years. They mailed them to the house, where they accumulated in the mailbox like snowdrifts, unread. 6 months later, a postcard arrived. It was from Auckland, New Zealand. The picture showed a fjord, dark water cutting between green mountains. On the back, in Eleanor's familiar cursive, were only these words: "I am learning to waltz. The stars here are different. I hope you are well. Do not look for me. Look after each other." They held it like a holy relic, passing it between them on a conference call that lasted 3 hours, recounting every excuse, every missed Sunday. Every time they had let her voicemail reach its message, they understood, too late, that she had never wanted the money to change her life. She had wanted it to change theirs, to bring them back to the table where they had once been a family. Michael flew to Connecticut and sat in the empty dining room, in the chair he'd claimed as a boy, running his fingers over the grape juice butterfly on the tablecloth that was still there after all those years. Sarah planted daffodils in the garden, crying as she worked the soil her mother had tended alone for so long. The grandchildren began visiting the hospital wing that bore their grandparents' names, volunteering on Saturdays, sitting with sick children who craved attention the way their grandmother had craved theirs. On the first anniversary of the dinner that never happened, the 6 of them gathered at the mahogany table. They cooked the roast beef themselves, using the recipe card they found in Eleanor's box, stained with decades of her fingerprints. They set 8 places, 1 empty for Richard and now 1 empty for Eleanor, not because she was gone, but because she had finally gone somewhere they could not follow. And where, they understood with a clarity that was almost unbearable. They had told her in 1,000 small and careless ways that she was not wanted. The Yorkshires didn't rise. The apple pie was too sweet. But they sat there until midnight, talking, really talking for the first time in years, filling the chairs that had always been theirs, in the room that had always been waiting. Outside, the first snow of the season fell softly against the windows. Inside, the candles burned down to nothing. And somewhere on the far side of the world, on a ship crossing dark water toward a horizon that required no witness, Eleanor Margaret Hale was dancing. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't already, subscribe. New stories every week. Stories about quiet strength, second chances, and the people we underestimate.